Hey everybody, this is James P. Wagner here, also known as Ishwa, with Local Gems Press, one of the publishers for Local Gems. The title of this probably caught your attention because it goes against the grain for something that is a very well-respected mantra in the writing world. Writing is not rewriting. A short little lecture here that I'm going to go through. Now, before we get into that, just a little bit of why you might want to listen to me whatsoever about this topic, because there are lots and lots of professors, doctors, instructors, workshop leaders who say writing is rewriting all the time. So who am I to, have a contrary opinion on this? A little bit about me. As you know, I am, publisher for Local Gems Press. I'm an editor of over 120 anthologies. I was an award-winning fiction writer. I'm several times Amazon best-selling author for various titles, mostly poetry instruction, a couple other things. I used to teach at college. I've been guest lecturer, guest speaker at lots of libraries and campuses and schools and all sorts of things. And I was the National Beat Poet Laureate for the United States for the year of 2021. And none of that necessarily means I'm right about this. So this is going to attempt to actually convert you to my side of the thinking with this, with logic and facts and trains of thought. And by the end of it, maybe you'll still disagree with me, but that's okay. It takes all different types. But going to do my best to pitch this case in this lecture. So writing is not rewriting. A short lecture, maybe more of a medium-sized lecture. Uh, if you've ever taken any kind of a writing class or writing workshop, whether it's poetry, fiction, nonfiction, or you have a degree in writing or an English major, something like that, you've probably heard the writing is rewriting mantra. This is a mantra that's used in colleges, writing programs across the world. Hemingway originally said something to the effect of, the only real writing is rewriting. Obviously, a very famous author. Wrote many, many best-selling and very literary, impactful books. And so this phrase is accepted as, conventional wisdom. It's said over and over and over, for good reason and with good intention by a lot of professors because they're trying to, you know, basically pound into the students' heads that you need to do things more than once. You need to go back and revise and all that. And sometimes a lot of students aren't that eager about that. So it is a important phrase, and it's not completely incorrect, but it is very often said and very very often misunderstood, or at the very least incomplete information, as I would say. Again, with good intent and good reasons, and writing is very important, but we'll get into why this is very often misunderstood. Now, rewriting obviously is a very important part of writing. Nobody does anything even close to remotely good the first time that they do it. I mean, I guess sometimes if you're like really in the writing zone, especially maybe with shorter pieces like poetry, there is the occasion where, sometimes it comes out really good or close to done, but that's not very often. And that's usually during a moment of extreme inspiration and usually after one's been at it for quite a few years. Most of the time we write something and, we need to go back and retool it, revise it, and all that. Sometimes, pieces will actually, require a complete page one rewrite. I've seen people who've completely restarted their poetry books almost from the ground up. I've seen, novelists start again from page one when they were already halfway through. Sometimes you get far into a story and you kind of realize that, oh, this contradicts what I said previously, and maybe just for the sake of continuity, you need to go back and redo everything. Maybe you didn't like how it turned out. Maybe you change the tense. There's lots and lots of reasons why you would rewrite, and rewriting is a very important part of writing. So when I'm saying writing is not rewriting, that's not to say rewriting isn't very important. Definitely is, and I understand the motivation and what it is that these professors are trying to teach the students. But this is kind of where what they're attempting to impart and what actually gets imparted, sometimes there's a schism because many writers hear this mantra, get to know this mantra, and they completely misuse the mantra. Have you ever known a writer who is constantly reworking the same thing over and over and over and over ad nauseum? I think that if, you're in a writing circle, we all know at least one person like this who's been working on, the same novel, the same short story, the same set of poems, just constantly, and they're constantly rewriting, they're constantly reworkshopping it. And they're never really seeming to make much progress. And most of the time they never do. make progress when they're doing that. Like this is just a page example of like one page that somebody is obviously redoing everything. And that's because they're not really going to make that much progress when they've really only written one short thing and they're spending their entire time redoing that. Um, there's a poet that I knew who their first book and their only book was going to be out 10 years ago. It was supposed to go to their publisher, and they kept on going back and reworkshopping and reworkshopping and reworkshopping, and they've reworkshopped it to the point that it's never going to come out. But here's the big reveal that this very controversial thing I'm about to say. Writing is writing, which would seem very self-explanatory and kind of is for most people, but there's a habit when people go through the writing is rewriting mantra where they think that the rewriting is really where it's at, and they think that somehow spending more time on the rewriting excuses you from the writing itself. First of all, you can't rewrite if you haven't written in the first place. And like we said before, if you have one page that you're rewriting constantly and you're spending all your time on that, um, you're not even going to be good enough at understanding writing to really rewrite it well enough to even make that worth it. Because if you haven't written enough, you haven't paid your dues writing a lot of stuff to kind of get the skill in order to be a better writer, you're never going to have the skill to rewrite something. Just for an analogy here, and this isn't a perfect analogy, but take a piece of steak. Okay, if you have a really bad cut of steak, and you burn it to a crisp, okay, like it's absolutely horrible, and that's how it comes out. It doesn't matter how much you saute it. It doesn't matter how many spices you put on it. It's still going to be a horrible steak, right? And so, if all you've written is a couple of pages and they're horrible, you're not really going to be able to rewrite those into something that's miraculous just because you spend a year retooling those pages, because especially if that's all you've written, you're never going to get the skill required to even know how to improve it. So one page or 1,000 pages. Bruce Lee had a good quote that's very famous. That's people have applied to a lot of different fields of study and accomplishments, etc. And that quote is, "I do not fear the man who practices 1,000 kicks one time each. I fear the man who practices one kick 1,000 times." And it's a very good quote, and it's a very true quote because depth is sometimes better than breadth. Um, and sometimes people actually use this quote to try to actually argue about the rewriting side of things, as they say, oh, if you rewrite the same page 1,000 times, that'll be a really good page, rather than if you've written 1,000 pages. And I say that it's exactly the opposite in this regard. And I think that if you interpret what he's saying a little bit to writing, it'll actually favor the other side things. Because do you think that the writer who only wrote one page is even capable of rewriting that same page 1,000 times and making it better? Or would you think that a writer who has written 1,000 pages over the time that they've been writing is going to be somebody who might acquire the skill to actually start to develop what good writing is? So, like this quote isn't an exact one-to-one, but the way that I'm interpreting it is that the person who wrote 1,000 pages is probably going to be better than somebody who, just wrote one page and just tries to rework it 1,000 times. Ray Bradbury said it best, I think, and that's because you have all of a lot of times you hear what's better, quality or quantity, and people use that when they're people be like, oh well, you haven't written that many pages, you haven't written that much, and people will be like, well, is it the quality or the quantity? And there's a little bit of hoity-toityness to that question back, because of course quality beats quantity. Okay, I don't think there's really anybody out there. I mean, okay, not anybody, very few people out there who are going to say that quantity beats quality when it comes to writing or art or things like that, because obviously you're in this to make something that is of quality. But as Ray Bradbury said, quantity gives experience, and from experience alone can quality come. And obviously Ray Bradbury was a very prolific writer. He wrote a lot of things, and he wrote a lot of really, really good things. Some would argue some great things. Um, and there's plenty of writers out there who wrote very little, or at least they published very little. and it was also really great. But we also didn't see what was going on behind the scenes, how many pages and pages and pages they wrote that they just threw out. Um, and so, that's the thing here is really what I'm trying to say is that I've seen that mantra misinterpreted so many times where people think that you write a little and you rewrite a lot, and that will somehow make you a good writer. And I've seen a lot of people do that, and I've never really seen those people go on to really become really good writers. The ones that I've seen become really good writers are the ones who have written a lot, revised a lot, yes, but also written a lot. Written that 1,000 pages, written, many, many poems, many chapters of a novel, and doing it, just for the sake of, the repetition and the practice, and through the writing itself, starting to gain the skill to be able to edit and even self-edit. Like I've noticed, in the workshops that I lead, where I also will do the writing, with my own, poetry writing style these days, a lot of time it might seem like I'm not editing a lot when it's out on the page, but the truth of the matter is I'm sort of self-editing it in my head before it kind of comes out. I mean, I go through stages where like it'll go first to, a handwritten page, and then it'll go to actually being typed up for, submitting for publication or publishing or whatever. But, I'll be thinking about it in my head first. And like literally as the words are kind of coming out, it's like before I'm even writing the words that, might be bad or, less ideal, I'm almost correcting it as it comes. But that's only come after like years and years of writing thousands and thousands of pages that were, pretty not good, for lack of a better way of putting it. But, the experience of the quantity of doing that has given me the tool to self edit and then also to edit, because a lot of times I can go through a poem and a couple of revisions later it's pretty much ready, because when it came out, it usually, like, it came out now in this year, compared that to say 10 or 15 years ago, it comes out much better now, even the first time around, even when I am revising it, because the experience is there, that now it's like I don't really, it doesn't come out without it being certain level of form. Whereas if I had only written a couple of things and I spent the last 10 or 15 years just working on and revising those things, would never be at that level now. And that's the thing, is that I sort of find that some of the people who take the writing is rewriting mantra to heart are almost, whether consciously or not, sort of looking for an excuse to kind of skip a major step in the process, which is writing, the work of doing a lot of writing and not necessarily getting anything even good or publishable out of it. Paying the dues of the crap writing, so to speak. And that's something that's really unavoidable. Nobody is going to write one page and just rework that one page, and then that page is going to be like a Pulitzer Prize winning thing. That's not how it works, at least in my opinion. So, and that's why when people do this, I see a lot of them, they write very little, they revise a heck of a lot, and they produce really nothing that really gets out there much. And I've seen it, in the classes. Again, I would bump heads with my colleagues all the time over the saying, because they were very big about the writing is rewriting mantra. And it seemed like most of the time they kind of meant it more the way that I was talking about earlier, where like, yes, it is really important, but the way that a lot of students would somehow, misinterpret it was by thinking that you can skip the whole part of doing the writing. And, you can't. Writing is writing. Writing well is from the experience of writing and writing a lot. And only through doing, like Bradbury says, going through that quantity of experience of writing a lot of pages, a lot of poems, a lot of chapters, a lot of short stories, are you ever going to actually get the experience that then's going to create the quality or the ability to make quality by rewriting and revising. So again, this is not an attack on rewriting. I know that there are some people out there who are very stream of consciousness. They think the first thing you write is automatically done. Philosophically, there might be some ways which that might be true, like certain, like Japanese sand art and things like that. I could see the argument behind it in some regards. I don't completely agree with it. I'm not saying that rewriting isn't important, so that's not what this is an attack at all. But I'm saying that this thing is misinterpreted, and there's a big step there, and that step is paying your dues, writing a lot. And so I would say writing is not rewriting, writing is writing. And until you do that writing, the rewriting is not going to come out all that good anyway. So that's my little lecture slash rant on how writing is not rewriting. Um, you know, maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't, maybe you're somewhere in the middle, maybe you haven't figured out what you think yet. But figured I would just put this out there. Hopefully some people will understand my interpretation of it and take it for what it is. Feel free to tell me if you agree or disagree. You could reply to, this video or this email this video came in or whatever. Definitely looking forward to a dialogue about this or seeing what people think. But yeah, that's all I got for you today. Hopefully, at the very least, you got something out of it, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.